And we are here with Bill. Bill, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've actually been looking forward to talking to you after everything that you've done in your work's life. What if you begin telling us a little bit about your background?
Okay. As you can see by my appearance, I'm an old guy. Been around for a little bit. Ever since I've been young, I have been focused on how to be the best I can be. And I did that in high school and college with both my academics and athletics. I was a high school athlete, I was a college athlete. After I got out of college, I started coaching. I coached at both the high school and college level. And during that time, I paid a lot of attention to the scientific improvements to cause people to be better physically. And I paid a lot of attention to all the research in relation to what people had to do to emotionally handle situations. Because what we know is there's a lot of outstanding athletic talent that doesn't get used effectively because people can't control their emotional reactions during a game or before the game. And what the research tells us, the brain research tells us, is that if you feel overwhelmed or if you have high amounts of negative emotion, it's going to actually paralyze performance. And we see that in all walks of life, not just athletics. You see it with musicians, you see it with business people. If a man or woman is going to make a proposal of marriage, they sometimes get so tied up with it that they stutter and they don't say the words that they had rehearsed over and over again because they were so nervous. So all of that led up to what I worked on when I was earning my doctorate at Seattle University. I've got a doctorate in leadership and organizational development, and that's really the psychology behind what goes on with people and organizations. And what I found was the same thing is true in people and organizations as is true in athletics and teams, that there is a need to have a certain level of talent, but the key is execution always transcends talent. And when we say execution, there are 5 intangibles that control execution. They are your awareness of the situation you're in and your ability to monitor and adjust, your emotions and how you can control your emotions to get the best results, your habits and how they control behavior. Habits control, depending on the study, 40 to 75% of all human behavior. And it's part of what the brain makes you do. Then there's expectations, and expectations of others and your own expectations impact how you perform. And then that term self-efficacy, which is a big $50 word, which just really means the belief you have in yourself, in your ability to handle whatever situation you're facing. So those are the 5 intangibles that control all behavior. And I studied formally and informally many people. And when I was writing my book, Achieve Beyond Expectations, I actually studied over 100 people in all walks of life, all races, all ethnicities. And it all comes down to those 5 intangibles impacting their behavior. So that's a quick run through of what I've been doing. Now, having said that, we applied that in the real world. I was, in my former life, an elementary school principal. And I was appointed to a school that had the lowest performance in the district for years. And it had all kinds of other problems. And the district had had 2 strikes in 3 years prior to the time I was appointed. So I had to deal with the issues of the teachers who were really fighting the administration. I had to deal with poverty and English language learners in my school, because that has a tremendous impact on how kids learn. And to make a long story short, I took all this research and made the school a high achieving school in 3 years. Then I said, if I could do that with my school, I could do it with all kinds of other schools. So for the next 30 years, I took this same process, trained up to 75 consultants, and we worked in 19 states, over 2,000 schools, and turned them from failing schools into high achieving schools. So with no power and authority, we just had to convince people that this was the right thing to do. So these 5 intangibles were the things that we had to get people to understand and to work through to get them to the point where they could get English language learner kids, kids from poverty, kids that the only time they ate was when they were in school for free breakfast or free lunch, kids that came to school. And well, in my own case, I was principal of the school where we had an influx of Vietnamese children right during the Vietnam situation, which is many years ago, and they spoke nothing but Vietnamese. And within 3 years, we had them reading on grade level because we applied the research. So that's a very quick thumbnail sketch of what my whole life has been about.
Wow. So this is such a relevant conversation right now, in terms of what's going on socially, and how, I was just having a conversation with one of my really good friends, and we were discussing the opportunity issue, and how a lot of schools, and it's almost an intangible, right? And how when, people like you can come into a school and really improve the system to be able to create the opportunity. Because I think, as a minority, I didn't have certain opportunities. I thought I understood the minority issue, but I don't, because I'm learning so much in these last couple months about it. But what you're saying is so important, because this is such a relevant issue right now. How do you see the different opportunities? Do you see that whenever you went and work with the schools, their opportunity, just because the school was run better, was improved? Their chances of having a successful, meaningful life were improved?
Okay. I want to talk first about the schools and then next about the individuals. First, with the schools, there's no excuse to have a school that has kids failing year after year after year on state exams. There's no reason for that. We have over 50 years of solid educational research that says, here's what you need to do. The problem is in education, just like the problem is in business and industry, just like the problem is in athletics, that people don't pay attention to the intangibles to implement that research effectively. I'll use a situation with athletics. Whether it's a professional team, a college team, or a high school team, there are some teams that are constantly achieving at a high level. And there are other teams that are average, and there are other teams that are mediocre. And when you evaluate the teams, you'll see a significant difference in the culture that the head coach creates. The same thing is true in business and industry. When you evaluate the highly successful businesses that are successful year after year after year, have good customer relations, have good employee relations, and make a profit, and all the variables that determine a successful company, they have a CEO that has paid attention to these 5 intangibles and purposely created a culture to support that. So it's responsibility of the leader, no matter what the setting, to make that happen. And I have read hundreds of books about business and industry, and the same with athletics. And they're all saying the same thing. The organization takes on the values and the beliefs and the characteristics of the leader. So if the leader isn't aware of and implementing the 5 intangibles, self-awareness, emotion control, habits, making sure your habits are doing what you want to do, making sure that you have high expectations, making sure that you have people believing that they can do the job, then it's not going to happen. And many businesses create these policies and procedures. No sexual harassment, no racism. But guess what? The culture overrides the policies and procedures because there's all kinds of sexual harassment, there's all kinds of racism, and the people in the leadership positions don't do anything about it. So when we go in and work with organizations, we first have to begin to look at what is being communicated by the people in leadership positions, because the people under them are going to take those as the cues to act in the way that they do. And that's the culture of the organization. And that drives excellence or it drives it to mediocrity.
In your experience with all these companies that you've worked with in schools, I mean, across the country, what was one of the schools that you remember the most that you got there and you were, that you really maybe that, oh, this is going to be challenging. And then how was the process of getting it through and then seeing it successful a couple of years down the line? Any one of
a real success story. I'm not going to say the elementary school. It was an elementary school in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The principal had been there a year and knew that she didn't have the wherewithal to make it happen. So she contacted us. Now, please understand, 100% free and reduced lunch. And that means that all the kids coming there are in poverty. And
wow.
Most of those kids coming to that school, and there were over 625, most of them are coming and they get 2 meals a day, both of which are at the school, breakfast and lunch. That's all the food they get. Next thing is, it was 95% Hispanic.
Wow.
They spoke Spanish coming to school.
Wow.
Their parents spoke Spanish at home. And by the time they get to 3rd grade, they have to be able to take the state test in English in grades 3, 4, and 5 to pass it in reading and math. So those are the obstacles that had to be overcome. So we had to teach the teachers new habits in relation to how they taught the kids. We had to get the teachers to believe that they could get the kids to learn. Because if you don't believe you're going to be able to do something, it doesn't happen. So that was the expectation thing. It was the self-efficacy thing. We had to teach the teachers to control their emotions, because teaching is one of the most frustrating, difficult jobs in the world. You're trying to do the very best you can and the kid isn't getting it. So you have a tendency to blame the kid. And we had to stop that, and that becomes a habit pattern. We had to stop that, and we had to give the teachers more tools on how to overcome the obstacles that they're dealing with the kids. And none of this occurs unless they have self-awareness. They have to be aware of their own selves, their emotional reactions, what they're saying, their self-talk. Then they have to be aware of what the kids are doing and how they're responding and the kids' emotional reaction. The biggest thing we had to do is get the teachers to create a positive, relaxed atmosphere in the classroom, because no learning occurs when there is fear or people are on a negative emotional edge. If I call it emotion commotion. If you have emotion commotion, nothing positive comes from it, only negatives. So those are the things we did. The principal bought into it 100%. And within a 5-year period of time, because it took 5 years, her school was in the top 3 performing schools in the district it's a very large district, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And they were doing so well that the district gave the teachers big financial bonuses because they had made such a turnaround.
Wow. That's amazing. And so when you say self-awareness, how do you get people to be self-aware? Because I know you use this in healthcare. You know, we use this all the time, self-awareness. How do you, what transformations have to happen within the person, and what sort of tactics do they have to do to actually make that happen?
Okay, that's the second chapter in my book, Achieving Beyond Expectations: The 5 Intangibles to Make the Impossible Possible. So I have a whole chapter about it. I will give you the nutshell, little piece of it. Okay, there's
Gotcha.
internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. Internal self-awareness is paying attention to your emotional reactions, your physical reactions, and your self-talk, what you say to yourself. And being aware when you're in a positive state or in a negative state. Now, anytime the brain thinks it's being threatened, it goes into a survival mode. That's the fight flight mode. And I have in chapter 3, Avoid Emotion Commotion, I have a whole diagram that I'm going to try to just give the high points of, called Response to Perceived Threat. The first thing that happens, your brain's first job is survival, physical survival. But the brain doesn't know the difference between physical safety and emotional safety. So it treats emotional safety just like it would physical safety. So if I say, hey, Doc, that's the stupidest looking jacket I've ever seen.
And I
I don't like the way
appreciate that,
you laugh.
Bill.
I don't like the way you laugh, man. Okay? You could take offense to that. It affects
Right.
your ego. Okay?
Right.
Now, you have your immediate reaction. Your blood pressure goes up. Your heart rate goes up. You release cortisol. You release fat, all for the fight flight. And then the next thing that happens is you have a physical reaction in your body. You feel a flush. You feel your heart. You feel your chest beating. You're breathing a little harder. You might shake a little bit. And you might say, "What's the matter with this guy? Why you say that?" That's the first clue you have that you can take control. You can't do anything. I've described the first 3 boxes of this perceived threat, response to perceived threat. You can't do anything for box 1, box 2, or box 3. It's hardwired into us. When you feel the sensations, when the words come out of your mouth of, "Oh crap," or "What's he doing?" that's where you have to begin your self-awareness. Uh-oh, something's going on here. Now I have a choice. All stress is self-imposed. You can choose distress, or you can choose eustress. Distress is negative. It turns you into emotion commotion. Eustress says, wow, this is a challenge. This is exciting. I can take this on. Let's see how I can handle this. It is your choice. I'm doing a presentation on Saturday. I have a video of Serena Williams, very famous women's tennis player. In January 2017, she was 3 months pregnant when she won the Australian Open. She took 18 months off to have her baby. She came back to the French Open in 2019. She was in the first match in the French Open. She lost the first set. If she loses another set, she's out of the tournament. She lost the first game in the first set, and after that, she walked back to the line to serve. She let out a primal scream and she stamped her foot. Then she got the ball from the ball boy. She looked up, she concentrated, and she went on to win the match. She was interviewed afterwards, and they said, "What was that primal scream?" She said, "It was my way of telling myself that I'm the best women's tennis player in the world and that I can clean up my act. I've been playing horrible all of this time. I can do a good job. I just have to concentrate and rely on my training and let myself play the way I know I can play." And she did, and she won. From that point on, the television announcers through the entire tournament were referencing back to her, because All the other players, when things weren't going well, they got emotion commotion. They let the distress take hold, and their play got even worse. So going back to the response to perceived threat, when you get that first sensation in your body that something's going on and you're not comfortable with it, and you hear yourself say something negative and you feel these things, reactions in your body, you have to make your frontal lobe come into play. Your frontal lobe can control your limbic system and your reticular activating system. And your frontal lobe is the logic. It's part of the cerebellum, and it's the logic of your brain. So you can take charge. So what did Serena do? She screamed and then had a conversation with herself in less than 10 seconds. I'm the best women's tennis player in the world. I am far better skilled than this person. I'm in far better shape. Clean up your act. We can do this. Stay positive. And she stayed positive. She served. The other person hit it back. She got it, blah, blah, blah. The match went on. But the point was, from that point on, she was in control. She chose to have eustress rather than distress. All stress is self-imposed. You can decide to have distress or eustress.
Do you think that to be able to do that, she's hardwired herself to make that choice, constantly, like in the worst possible situations, to forget about what's going on around? You know, half the people would feel self-conscious about just letting out a scream like that. But she broke a pattern and she changed her state of mind. You know, states of mind are almost one of the most powerful things. And doing that primal state, you think she's probably practiced that primal scream and that stomp and anchored it.
Okay, let me just share with you. Every human being, let me back up. Any human being that doesn't have some type of handicapping conditions that prevent it,
right?
Okay, has that ability.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a very specific example. You are working and your boss, you're in a meeting and you've worked on a project, and your boss rips you for doing such a bad job on a project, and you're shocked because you thought you'd done a pretty good job. How do you react during that meeting? Do you come back at the boss and yell and scream and holler at him? Or do you sit there and take it and try to figure out what the devil you can do to make this better, and talk to the boss and see how to fix it? Most people do the second. They sit there, they take it, they control their reactions, and they try to figure out what they can do to make it better. Same person at home. Something happens at home with a family member, a significant other, and they say something to you to get you upset. And you go off on them. And there's this angry outburst. And because you got angry at them, they get angry at you. And it's all this toxic gas going on, and it's corroding the environment. And it just gets worse and worse and worse and becomes a wildfire. Now, the same person was in both situations, right? In the situation at work and the situation at home. They controlled themselves at work, but they didn't control themselves at home. It is your choice. Don't tell me I can't do it. Yes, you can. You do it when you think it's necessary for you to do, and you don't do it when you don't think it's necessary for you to do. You all have the choice. It's not just Serena Williams. It's not just an athletic contest. It is every situation. You make that evaluation. What's going to get me what I need right now? And one of the things that I try to get people to understand, I work with parents a lot. Parents have a tendency, and parents and spouses have a tendency to treat their family members worse than they treat the people that they work with and their friends, because they go off on their family members. They never go off on their friends. They don't go off on the people that they work with. So We all have the ability to control ourselves if we choose to use it. And habits plays a major role, okay? Habits play a major role in this because at home, there's certain culture and habit patterns at home. At work, there's different culture and habit patterns. And at work, if you're in a really good organization, that kind of negative behavior is not allowed.
Right.
Your peers don't allow it. Okay.
Right.
At home, it's encouraged and it shouldn't be encouraged because
Right.
it only creates more problems. So habit patterns have a way, and you can switch like that. Going back to schools, work in high schools. A kid in period 1 is a royal pain in the behind. The teacher hates the kid. He's in discipline problems all the time. He doesn't do homework. He doesn't perform in class. That same kid in period 2 is at the top of his class. He always performs. He's always doing well. You ask the teacher in period 1, what about this kid? And they'll say he's the worst kid I've ever had. I heard about him before he came through here, and I knew he was going to be a problem. You ask his period 2 teacher, and she says, I heard about him. He's a royal terror, and I made the decision I was going to connect with him and get him to perform in my classroom. See the difference?
Absolutely.
We saw that all the time. We would see kids' problems in one class in high school and not a problem in another. It's because of what the teacher does and how the kid is treated. Habit patterns. They teach the kids, the teachers teach the kids in the high-performing classrooms, habit patterns. Here's the things you have to do. They don't teach them those things in the lower-performing classrooms. Just like in business and industry, just like in your home and family. Okay? I'm living in a situation right now where my son and his husband have twins that are 2 years, 9 months old, and they're living with us here in Seattle right now because their regular home is in Mesa, Arizona. It's 120 degrees down there, and they don't want to live in that heat. Now, fortunately, we got a big enough home. But I am observing firsthand, day after day after day, how the habit patterns of those 2-year-old boys are being molded and shaped. They get upset, and Dad says, you can handle this. You're okay. We know you're upset. It's okay to be upset. You just don't throw things when you're upset. You can yell, you can scream, but you don't throw things. Throwing things hurts things. It hurts people. They are teaching them habit patterns that start to form. Well, infants, you know, as a doc, infants develop habit patterns of sleep and eating right away.
Yeah.
And the sooner you can develop those habit patterns, the better off the kid's going to be.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was getting at when you were talking about Serena Williams, that a lot of these athletes have wired in habits that show up in these moments, habits that are so valuable in these moments that will create this breakthrough moment, that they have the capacity, that they just go back to what they do. You know, she screams and stumps her foot, that they go back into that. You know, but I think you're right. I think we all have the ability to do that, and I think habits are such a big issue, specifically with kids. And what you mentioned with the high performance habits of the teachers. I mean, there was a study that was done that if the teacher wrote back to the children, this is the paper, here are the corrections. The kid wrote back, I think 40% of the kids wrote something back. But if the note said, this is the corrections and I'm giving them to you because I have high expectations of you, 75% of the kids returned that paper corrected. And so that study blew my mind, and it speaks to what you're talking about. It has so much to do with what the teachers believe, the belief system that they have of these kids and what they are capable of doing, the self-awareness of that, you know?
I report studies like that in the chapter on expectations. Here's a study. The researchers took a group of people and said to them, we want you to train these lab rats. The rats in group A have been trained to be, have been genetically modified to be maize bright rats. The rats in group B have been genetically modified to be maze dull rats. You have X amount of time to train these rats to go through this maze as quickly as they can. After several weeks, they came back and they did a test, and the group that had the maze bright rats by far did a better job than the maze dull rats. Caveat to the story: there was no genetic training. The study was not about the rats, the study was about the trainers. And all the researcher did was plant the mindset in the one set of trainers: these rats are bright. Plant the mindset in the other group of trainers: these rats are dull. And guess what? That's exactly what happened, because expectations drive behavior. The same thing was repeated in an adult vocational educational program with welding. They randomly selected half the people in the welding class and told the instructor, these people have been tested and show the highest propensity to be outstanding welders. These people are going to be mediocre or average at best. At the end of the welding class, guess what happened? Same thing. They did the same thing with elementary school children. So the expectations that the leader has of the followers determines how those people will react, whether it's in education, athletics, parenting, or whatever. If you expect your kids to be well behaved when you go to a restaurant to eat, they will be. If you expect them to misbehave when you go to a restaurant to eat, guess what? They will. Now, the parents that expect the good things also do things to make sure it happens and reinforce the appropriate behavior. The parents that are expecting the bad things, as soon as kid makes one mistake, they jump on. And the kid makes another mistake, they jump on. And now we've got this fight-flight syndrome, and the kid is now going to show the parent it's a power struggle. And they're going to do things to purposely create upsetness during the dinner. So it's expectations drive behavior.
And then in terms of you mentioned the self-efficacy and the parents' ability to, not the ability, but the responsibility to actually relentlessly support then that expectation, right? The support has to be backed, right?
That's right. Yes. Yes. Again, multiple times in my book, I talk about what leaders have to do. And leaders have to communicate what they expect, show a vision of it, connect to the followers emotionally. Here are the good things that are going to happen as a result of doing this. Then they have to give them the resources, the materials, the money, the time, and the training to do it. If they don't do that, it's not going to happen. And one of the things that happens when I go into organizations, when I'm working with groups of people, is they have unrealistic high expectations of people, and they do nothing to help them be successful. They think because they're an adult, they can figure it out. And that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't.
Go back, one of the groups I study were the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs are constantly training, emotionally, physically, tactically. And they never go into a situation where they don't have all the materials and supplies and everything that they need. Now, once they're in there, they might not have everything they need because they hadn't anticipated it, but that's when their creativity and their emotional control comes into play. Because we know that if you have emotion, commotion going on, you can't be creative, you can't think at a problem-solving level, you can't be higher level thinking. So that's why they spend so much time with the Navy SEALs controlling their emotions and realizing that they have all this capacity that's untapped that they can draw on. The really good football coaches do the same thing. The really good basketball coaches. My two sons were in a jazz choir in high school, and they competed all around the Northwest. And whenever they were in the contest, everybody knew that they were competing for second place because the Delsonics were going to win. But the Dave Cross, the choral director, not only taught the kids effective singing techniques, he taught them how to communicate with the audience. He taught them how to interact with each other. So it was this wonderfully choreographed song presentation. And then when things weren't going well, y'all have bad days, he taught them how to deal with the emotions so that they could overcome that and make the best of a bad situation. So it makes no difference what walk of life you're in. It boils down to your self-awareness, your emotional control, your habits. Are your habits doing what you want them to do? What you expect, high expectations of yourself and others, and finally your belief in what you can do. If you believe you can do it, you'll find a way to do it.
In terms of habits, this is such an interesting conversation, because in medicine, or when people, let's say they're trying to lose weight or stop eating sugar, a lot of times there is a vacuum that's created. You know, when somebody stops drinking, or when somebody stops something that's really hurting them their lives, there is a vacuum that's created in their life. And unless it's replaced by something, by some other habit, because they're in the habit of doing that, they're in the habit of drinking. People don't look at those as habits, but those are habits. And so how do you think people can overcome that pain, that it takes that friction pain, that it hurts to become someone else? And that's when the identity starts really changing.
Okay. You have emotional habits. You have intellectual habits. In other words, the way you think about things. You have physical habits. You have habits in every walk of life. The intimacy you have with your significant other, and I'm not just talking about sexual intimacy, I'm talking about the relationship, the rapport you have, the eye contact that you make, the words that you say, the way you touch, the way you respond verbally and non-verbally. Those are all habits that impact the intimacy you have with a significant other, whether it's a child or a spouse or a family member. You have all of these habits, and if you're going to do what you're talking about in relation to weight loss, or in relation to a cessation of smoking, or an alcohol issue, you've got to realize that there are two types of habits, competing and non-competing. And again, I have a whole chapter in the book about habits. And there's competing habits and non-competing habits. The non-competing habits, an example of a non-competing habit is if you learn a new hobby like photography and you never did anything like that before.
Right.
If you wanted to learn how to knit a sweater and you've never done that before, that's a non-competing habit. You have to have all kinds of habit patterns to do that kind of thing. And by the way, a habit is not one act. A habit is a plethora of multiple tiny little acts that get reinforced and get connected to each other and form neural pathways in your brain and body. Okay, that's what habits are. You literally create neural pathways, and it's a chemical exchange at the synapse, and they literally can show that chemical exchange happening. Mm-hmm. Okay, I've got a graph that shows that, and then I've also got a video that shows that. So you've got this physical reaction going on in your body in relation to habits. If you've got a non-competing habit, it's easy to establish in comparison to a competing habit. And by the way, there is people out there that says it takes 21 days to establish a new habit. That couldn't be further from wrong. There's no solid, good research that supports that. It takes hundreds and hundreds of repetitions to create a habit, whether it's a competing or a non-competing. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, with always getting feedback. So if you want to stop eating the way you're eating, change your eating habits, that is got tremendous emotional habits attached, because we eat all kinds of food to comfort ourselves when we have emotion commotion going on.
Like one of my patients said to me recently, I eat my emotions.
You got it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So you're not only changing your eating habits, you have to look at your emotional control. You have to know the content behind what's really good to eat and how to eat it. You've got to have the tactics on preparing all kinds of meals and having the meals that you need that are nutritious and food that's nutritious, rather than the stuff that's not good for you that has created you to be 50 or 100 pounds overweight. So you have to deal with the emotional aspect of it. You have to deal with the dietary aspect of it, the nutritional aspect of it. You have to deal with the tactics aspect of it in relation to having the stuff that's good for you there and not having the stuff that's not good for you there. And then you have to have a support person or group that is there to support you. And the other thing is, you can't expect perfection.
Right.
Perfection's not possible.
You nailed it. Yeah.
My son-in-law says he's got an 85-15 rule. 85 good eating habits, 15%, 85% good eating habits, 15% eat what I want. Okay? And that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and you've got to reward yourself. You've
Right.
got to get extrinsic reward and intrinsic reward. The extrinsic reward is what happens on the scale, and it's the coach. All these weight loss programs, the really ones that are effective are doing all these things. In my book, in the habits chapter, there's a 9-step process to follow to create a new habit pattern, a new competing habit. Okay? And if you look at that 9-step process, it's very similar to what the weight loss programs that are really successful, where people not only lose the weight, but they keep it off.
Right.
It's the same concepts. And I've given you the basis of it when I've just been talking right now.
That's awesome, Bill. Well, we're getting to an hour, and I want to respect your time. But I'd love to do this again with you because, I mean, there is so much to talk about with habits and everything. And I appreciate so much your time and all your stories. And I had a bunch of aha moments that you gave me. So I really appreciate it, Bill.
Thank you. I've appreciated this opportunity. It came on very unexpectedly, and I love it. And as you can tell, I'm enthusiastic about it. So
Definitely, definitely. All right, Bill. Take care.
thank you.